Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something, well, pretty profound. A really intricate question. Is the Arabic wording of the Qur'an contingent or necessary? It sounds maybe a bit abstract, but stick with us, because it touches on everything from divine revelation to, honestly, the nature of reality itself. We're going to be drawing a lot from a fantastic thread by Muhammad Abu Abdurrahman, who really digs into the insights of the great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah. Our goal here isn't just to throw big words around. We want to help you navigate these complex ideas: contingency, necessity, what they mean for God, for creation, and crucially for the Qur'an. It has huge implications. So let's get into it. Okay, so contingency and necessity. In this context, it sounds very philosophical. What are we actually trying to get at with these terms?
That's the perfect place to start, yeah. Ibn Taymiyyah gives us a solid foundation with what he calls the possibility of substantial origination. So when we say contingency here, we're basically talking about something that could exist, or it could not exist. It doesn't have to be here, you know? And for something to be contingent in this way, it means it's possible for it to pop into existence if it wasn't there before. Think of it like this. This possibility, it's not just an abstract thought, it's considered a real characteristic, subsisting in a prior material state. What's that mean? Well, imagine a seed. The seed itself has the possibility of becoming a plant, right? But it needs stuff first: soil, water, sun. Those are the prior material conditions. That potential, that could be but isn't yet quality, is tied to the stuff that allows it to happen.
I see, right. So it's something that could exist, but doesn't have existence on its own steam. It needs something else to kickstart it. That feels like a key distinction. But what's the bigger picture here? How does this idea of contingency lead us to, well, a necessary God?
This is where it gets really central to the argument. The very fact that something can originate, that it has this contingency built in, is seen as solid proof of its total dependence on a necessary God. I mean, if something could exist or not exist, it clearly doesn't hold its existence inherently, right? It needs an external source. And here's the kicker. You can pile up all the contingent things you want. Every atom, every galaxy, every living creature, that entire collection, all of it still needs an external, independent cause. And that cause, well, by logic, it can't also be contingent. It has to be something that exists necessarily, something that must exist. That's the necessary maker. And, you know, this constant cycle we see everywhere, things coming into being, changing, ceasing to exist, that whole process points to their reliance on an eternal originator. This originator is always bringing things into and out of existence. So the fact that something could originate and then actually does originate, they're two sides of the same coin, really. Both point to Allah's existence.
That makes a lot of sense. It shifts how you see the world, not as self-sufficient, but constantly upheld. But you mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah goes deeper. There's a subtler kind of contingency, too.
Exactly. It's not just about a whole substance coming into being. There's a more nuanced type. The possibility of an attribute popping up within something that already exists, but specifically because of outside influences. Okay, let's use the examples from the source. They're quite clear. Think about clouds. The clouds exist, they're the substrate. But their shapes, how they're arranged, those are attributes that arise in the clouds because of something external, like the wind pushing them. The wind's energy causes those formations. Or heating water. The water's the substrate. The heat increasing in the water. That energy comes from outside, like the burning fuel underneath. Energy gets transferred. The water gains heat. The fuel loses potential energy. Even this kind of contingency, where attributes change due to external factors, is also seen as evidence for Allah. You need an eternal creator to explain these constant energy shifts across systems.
Okay, so everything created, from its basic existence to its changing features, seems to point back to this necessary God. But what about God himself? Do these kinds of dependencies apply? Does God get attributes from outside?
Right, and this is absolutely critical. Neither of those types of contingency applies to God. Not substantial origination, not gaining attributes from external conditions. Those are strictly for created things. God's essence, his attributes, they are all necessary. They just are. They're independent, self-contained. He doesn't get his attributes from anywhere else. Because he necessarily exists, his attributes are also necessary and uncreated, all of them. Now, that doesn't mean God is simple in a limiting way. He's one creator, but described with many perfections: power, will, knowledge, and even descriptions that sound physical, like the source mentions: 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 shins, 2 feet. This multiplicity of perfect attributes doesn't make him contingent or dependent. It's an uncreated, necessary aspect of his perfection. It's not like he's assembled from parts by something else, which is totally different from the universe, right? The universe is this huge collection of separate atoms, always rearranging. Its path isn't predetermined by physics alone. It constantly needs that external creator, the specifier, to guide it, choosing one possibility over others. God, however, isn't guided externally. His nature unfolds from within, necessarily.
That draws a really sharp line between the creator and creation. But okay, if God is absolutely necessary, totally self-contained, does he still have a possibility to act? Because acting sounds like it involves choice, maybe making one thing happen instead of another. How does that square with absolute necessity? It feels a bit like a paradox.
That's a great question, and exactly what Ibn Taymiyyah tackles with his second kind of possibility. He calls it the possibility to act, which is basically, well, power, and the answer is definitely yes, God must have this power. It's a perfection. A God who can act is more perfect than one who can't. So when we say it's possible for God to speak the Qur'an or create a tree, we just mean it's within his power. Having that power is a sign of perfection, not dependence. The crucial point here is that this possibility related to action doesn't make God contingent like a created thing. He doesn't need an external maker for his actions. He acts from his own nature, successively from eternity to eternity, without any higher cause directing him. His actions, his voluntary acts, are uncreated and independent. Think about it like this. A carpenter makes a chair. The chair is a created thing, separate from him, but the carpenter doesn't create his own decision to make the chair, or the act of hammering. Similarly, God creates the universe, but he doesn't create his own decisions, his own voluntary acts, or his speech, like the Qur'an. He just decides, acts, speaks. So even if he could have done other things, choosing one doesn't make him dependent or contingent in that first sense. It flows from his own perfect nature.
Creating an effect versus performing an uncreated act. It means his actions aren't made the way the universe is. But didn't Ibn Taymiyyah break down power itself even more? Like, there are different kinds of power involved.
He did, yes, and this is absolutely vital to grasp the whole picture. He talks about two types of power. First, there's the power that precedes the act. Think of this as your basic capacity, your underlying ability, like having a healthy body and a sound mind. This power relates to the whole range of things you could potentially do, the menu of possible acts, as he puts it. For humans, having this preceding power is why we have moral responsibility. If you're able, you could perform Hajj, or you could choose not to. You have the fundamental capacity. But crucially, just having this capacity doesn't force the act. It doesn't guarantee you'll do it. It just means you will act if you then form a decisive intention. It's the ability before the decision. Then there's a second type, the power that accompanies the act. This is, well, it's a whole different thing. It's the combination of a decisive will and the complete immediate ability to do it, arising right before the act itself. And this second type of power necessitates the act. It's impossible, according to this framework, for this power to arise in someone without the act immediately following. If God gives a person the decisive will and full potency for Hajj, then the act of going must happen. So you see the difference. One is the general capacity. The other is the immediate, decisive will plus potency that makes the act inevitable right then and there.
Okay, wow. Two kinds of power. The potential capacity and the immediate act necessitating power. So how does this apply to God? And specifically, how does it relate to the Arabic wording of the Qur'an? Because it sounds like God would have both, but maybe in a unique way.
Exactly. That's where it gets really profound. God possesses both kinds of power, but in the most perfect, absolute way. Regarding the first type, the preceding power, God is eternally powerful, his attributes are perfect, his preceding power covers not just what he does do, but everything he could have done if he had willed differently. So yes, in that sense, it was within God's power to reveal a different book to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, meaning if he had willed it, it would have happened. But, and this is the critical point, given that God's necessary perfection also means he possesses the second kind of power, the accompanying power, which includes his decisive will to reveal this specific Qur'an, then this Qur'an, in its specific Arabic wording, becomes necessary. The fact that other options were within his preceding power doesn't make the actual revealed Qur'an contingent. No. Instead, God's divine acts, his speech acts included, like the specific Arabic of the Qur'an, are understood as necessary outcomes, necessary entailments of his constant maximal perfection. They couldn't not happen when their time came. So, as a matter of divine necessity, God voluntarily spoke the uncreated words of the uncreated Qur'an in Arabic in a composition that was necessary, that couldn't have failed to exist. Why? Because God's own essence has an internal succession, a flow that is necessary and deterministic. Think of it like His perfection unfolding perfectly according to its own inner logic. Each divine state or moment leads necessarily to the next and arises necessarily from the one before. It's not open to different possible futures in the way our world might be. It's fixed, self-determined. God knows his current state perfectly, which means he knows all his past and future states and intentions, all flowing necessarily from his perfect nature. So he's absolutely necessary, his essence, his attributes, and his acts. He doesn't depend on anything outside himself to guide his actions or determine the words he speaks.
Okay, right. Now this feels like the core of it now. We've established God has both powers, and his acts, including the Qur'an's wording, are necessary due to his perfect deterministic nature. But then the big question. Humans also seem to have both types of power, the capacity and the immediate power that necessitates action when present. So what's the fundamental difference? Why is our speech contingent and changeable dependent when God's word isn't? The source tackles this head on, right?
Absolutely, this is where it all comes together. And the source gives us two main reasons why human speech is fundamentally contingent, unlike the Qur'an. First, remember how we started. God originates humans ex materia from prior material conditions. He creates us out of stuff that existed before us, and that applies to everything about us, including our ability to speak. Since we originate materially, our attributes, like speech, also arise within us because of external conditions impacting our material being. This makes human speech inherently contingent by its very nature. Our contingency points back to the Creator. Now, contrast that directly with the Qur'an. The Arabic Qur'an isn't created from prior material conditions. It subsists in Allah's uncreated essence. It arises within his essence by his will, but in an uncreated way. It's not like something external causes God to speak or that the words form out of some external stuff. Any possibility related to the Qur'an is just that second type we discussed, God's power to utter it, which is part of his perfection, not a sign of dependency. Okay, second reason for human contingency, the world itself. The way the universe unfolds isn't fully deterministic in the same way God's internal nature is. God can and does intervene miraculously. He can change the usual course of events. The example given is fire. Normally, fire plus flammable stuff will burning. But God can miraculously suspend the fire's power or the object's ability to burn. Both outcomes, burning, not burning, are physically possible within the created order, and God can choose which happens. It's similar with human action, including speech. Even when a human has the decisive will and potency that would normally necessitate speaking certain words right now, God can subtly, miraculously influence that will or potency. He guides us, leading us to voluntarily say things we could have said differently or maybe not said at all. The idea is that God decrees what we will say. He's constantly selecting the path the universe takes from among possibilities. So our speech is contingent in this second way too. It's subject to God's ongoing decree and guidance within a world that allows for such intervention. This is completely different from the Qur'an's word. God utters that independently. His perfect life isn't being guided by some outside force making him speak. His internal succession, as we said, is necessary and deterministic.
Wow. Okay, let me try and sum that up. So our speech is contingent because, one, we're created beings made ex materia, so our attributes like speech are also originated and dependent. And two, we exist in a world where God actively guides events and can influence our will, making our specific utterances dependent on his decree. But the Qur'an's wording is necessary because, one, it subsists within God's uncreated essence, arising there in an uncreated way. And two, it's an independent utterance flowing necessarily from God's own perfect, internally deterministic nature, not subject to external influence or guidance. It's really the difference between created reality and the uncreated reality of God himself.
That's a perfect summary. It captures the core distinction Ibn Taymiyyah is drawing out.
This has been quite the deep dive, really getting into the weeds of Ibn Taymiyyah's thought on possibility, power, contingency, necessity. But hopefully it shed light on why this distinction between the Qur'an's wording and human speech is considered so fundamental. It gives you a framework, doesn't it? A way to think about these really complex theological ideas about revelation and creation and what makes them different. And maybe it leaves you with this thought to chew on. If the very words of the Qur'an are understood not just as inspired, but as necessary and uncreated and unalterable expression of God's perfect, deterministic will, what does that imply about the depth of meaning contained within them, about the absolute nature of the truth they convey, and how might really grasping that shape how you engage with it, how you approach it? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this exploration into contingency and necessity. We hope it gave you some new perspectives, maybe a few aha moments along the way. Until next time on The Deep Dive.